Welcome everyone, my name is Kushal.
My name is Mohammed.
My name's Zain.
Today we will be talking about the physics behind the famous CW series, The Flash! A particle accelerator is a machine that accelerates particles to very high energy. Circular accelerators propel around a circular track that can be used for colliding beams. Particle accelerators use electric fields to speed up the energy of a beam of particles, which are steered by magnetic fields. The strength of the magnets plus the radius of the circular path determines the maximum energy of the beam. The beam of particles travel inside a vacuum in a metal beam pipe. Electric fields make the particle go faster, while the magnetic fields make them go in a circular path. Electric fields spaced around the accelerator switch from positive to negative at a given frequency. Particles can be directed at a fixed target, or two beams of particles can be collided. In many cases, the Flash tends to run in a circular motion around his oppositions in order to trap them. The Flash must experience a centripetal force to stay in that circular motion. The centripetal force is a force that acts on a body moving in a circular path that is directed toward the center around which the body is moving. In this case, the Flash moving around the metahumans in the middle. The centripetal force can be represented by the equation F equals mv squared over r, where m is the mass, v is the object's velocity, and r is the radius of the curve. Uniform circular motion can be described as the motion of an object in a circle at a constant speed. In this case, the Flash is running around the metahuman at a constant speed, meaning his velocity is changing. Since his velocity is changing, the Flash is accelerating. This is known as centripetal acceleration. The centripetal acceleration can be calculated with the equation A equals v squared over r. The Flash uses his super speed to run up buildings, but how exactly can he achieve this without falling? The reason we can walk across the ground is because gravity pushes us downward. This downward force is then opposed by an upward normal force from the ground. This normal force is what enables static friction to be present between our feet and the ground, and this friction provides the horizontal force that lets us push ourselves forward and walk. In the case of running up a vertical surface, the Flash would require force from his feet to push himself in the direction of the intended motion. However, gravity is no longer pushing the Flash towards the wall. As a result, when the Flash pushes off the wall with his feet, the normal force that is required to generate friction is no longer opposed by anything. Let's take a man falling from a building as an example. As the man falls down, his downward velocity increases. As he falls faster, the force of air resistance increases. Gravity is pulling him down, and the force of air is pushing him up. Only the force of air resistance and gravity are equal. The sum of the forces is zero, meaning the man is falling at terminal velocity. In order for the Flash to run up the building and save the man, it would need to travel. As the man falls, he would need to accelerate upwards much faster than the gravity acceleration downwards. But nothing is pushing the Flash against the wall, so in order to have a frictional force, we would need a normal force. Something like this. This can be modeled by the equation F of F equals to US Fn, where US is the equivalent of static friction and Fn is the normal force. So how exactly can the Flash run up the building to save the man? This is because he has an infinite acceleration ability. He can obtain unlimited upward frictional force by exerting an infinite horizontal force. If he exerts an infinite horizontal force, he won't be pushed away from the wall. But, however, in reality that is not the case. No matter how fast you run up a vertical surface, you will get pushed back with the same force that you apply, because there will be no normal force. No normal force means no friction, and no friction means you falling off the building. Time dilation is the effect of time moving at different rates at different frames. The Flash experiences the effects of time dilation when he is traveling at super speed. The Flash experiences time slower in his reference frames. As he runs super fast, he will see things slow down around him. Due to the Flash being able to travel faster than the speed of light, he runs in a non-inertial frame. If a citizen were to see the Flash travel around the city, he will calculate the time it takes from one place to another by using the equation delta Tm equals delta Ts times lambda, where Tm is the dilated time, Ts is the stationary time, v is the velocity, and c is the speed of light. The two postulates of special relativity won't hold in this case because Flash is traveling faster than the speed of light and is in a non-inertial frame, and according to the second postulate of special relativity, the speed of light is always to be measured by the same by all observers in an inertial frame. Due to the Flash's speed being higher than the speed of light, all observers would not measure the speed of light the same and all laws of physics won't hold. But in reality, if the Flash were to run faster than the speed of light, he would disintegrate everything around him. Moreover, with the Flash's velocity being greater than the escape velocity of the Earth, he would fly right off the Earth's surface. While the Flash has the ability of super speed, he doesn't have a whole lot of strength. So when fighting larger opponents, the Flash generates more force in his punches through kinetic energy by packing speed into blows. This can be seen when the Flash needs to fight a man twice his size. In order to exert a great amount of force into his punches, the Flash runs a certain distance away from Girder, then runs at him at super speed and exerts a larger force of a punch on Girder than he would from standing still and applying a punch. This exertion of force over a distance is called work. Work is done when a force that is applied to an object moves that object. The amount of work done can be calculated by multiplying the force by the amount of movement of an object. An object's change in momentum is equal to its impulse. Impulse is a quantity of force times the time interval. Impulse is not equal to momentum itself, but rather it's an increase or decrease of an object's momentum. The change in momentum occurs when Flash needs to push Grodd, who is at rest, into a portal. Once Flash generates power to push Grodd, he will be moving, meaning he will have momentum, and during the push Grodd will experience a change in momentum. The impulse and change in momentum can be calculated by the equation F delta T equals mv. mv is the change in momentum while F delta T is the impulse. Or we can calculate this impulse by J equals F delta T, where F is the force in Newtons, T is the time, and J is the impulse in Newtons per time seconds. An object that is moving has momentum. The amount of momentum possessed by a moving object is the product of mass and velocity, P equals to mv. In a collision between object 1 and object 2, the force exerted on object 1 is equal in magnitude but opposite in direction to the force exerted on object 2. Basically, Newton's third law. Momentum can be seen in the Flash when the Flash runs into a group of barrels in a perfectly inelastic collision. In an inelastic collision, the two objects, Flash and the barrel, stick with each other after the collision, and the initial kinetic energy is less than the final kinetic energy. Given by the equation P total equals to P total prime, the collision that occurred between Flash and the barrels concluded with the barrels stopping the Flash's speed and thus being stuck together. The total kinetic energy decreased to zero when the collision occurred, and thus the objects have the same final velocity after the collision. Another collision can be seen in the Flash between two speedsters in an inelastic collision where both speedsters bounce off each other at moderate speeds. Momentum is conserved in this case, but the kinetic energy before the collision was greater than the kinetic energy after the collision. The Black Canary is able to mimic her sound and generate any sound she desires. The Black Canary scream can reach up to 300 decibels, which is enough to make a person's ears start bleeding even if they're not the attack target. Because anything over 200 decibels can almost kill a human, and any sound above 120 decibels can cause hearing loss in humans. How she achieves this is by using a device called the ultrasonic wave generation, which allows the canary to produce sound waves of any frequency. The frequency at which she yells at can be calculated by the equation F equals c over lambda, where c is the speed of light and lambda is the wavelength. Sound is a series of longitudinal waves that move through air. Sound does not travel in a vacuum. Sound has the characteristics of wavelength, frequency, amplitude, and speed. The relationship between these three is that velocity equals the wavelength times the frequency. The larger the amplitude of a sound wave, the louder the sound will be. Sound waves are created by vibration of some object. Sound is a regular mechanical vibration that travels through matter as a waveform. Because sound is the vibration of matter, it does not travel through a vacuum. The back and forth vibration of an object creates longitudinal waves of sound. Longitudinal waves are waves that oscillate in the same path that the sound wave is moving. The canary sound waves from her scream also display diffraction. Diffraction can be seen when the canary screams at an opponent. The sound waves coming from her mouth strikes her opponent, but the waves spread up and around her enemy to destroy whatever is behind him. The longer the wavelength and the smaller the opening, the more the diffraction will occur. What would happen if a villain were to oppose the canary scream with the same sound wave she is producing? The two waves will go under interference, and either two things can happen. If both waves from the black canary and the villain are in phase, they will add up for an increased intensity and higher amplitude. This is known as constructive interference. Second thing that can happen is that they can both produce out-of-phase waves and they can both cancel out each other, which is known as deconstructive interference.
Zoom is the main villain in the second season of The Flash. He's a speedster like Barry who gained his power in the particle accelerator explosion in his world known as Earth 2. Zoom basically wants to become the fastest man ever to live. The three powers of Zoom I will be explaining are about super speed, superhuman strength, and finally intangibility/body vibration. In the theory of relativity, time dilation is the difference of elapsed time between two events as measured by observers either moving relative to each other or differently situated from a gravitational mass. Zoom uses speed to time travel to run at extraordinary speeds. He has the ability to run on water due to his incredible speed, which is faster than the speed of light. When a civilian or passerby in Central City sees Zoom's speed by, they will see him travel faster than what he experienced himself. For the person to calculate how long it takes for Zoom to travel from one point of the city to the other, they would have to use the equation Tm equals to Ts over gamma. Ts representing the proper time, or the time the observer notices, and Tm being the time measured by the one moving in a stationary frame, in this case Zoom. In this case, Professor Wells, the man who is being chased by Zoom, will observe Zoom running faster than what Zoom will experience time around him himself. Professor Wells is the observer, while Zoom is the one who is in proper time. Momentum is the quantity of motion of a moving body measured as a product of its mass and velocity. Due to Zoom always running at such fast speeds, the force of momentum he creates is very large. The formula P equals to gamma mv can be used to determine Zoom's momentum when speed is added to the equation. Thus, the very fast speed of Zoom will create a very large force of momentum. A case which momentum is applied was with two other speedsters. During a scene in an episode, Flash had to take the Reverse Flash back to his original timeline. To do so, he physically pushed Reverse Flash back to his time portal to allow him to go back in time. The insanely large force of momentum which the Flash accumulated, plus with the momentum gathered by the Reverse Flash, was large enough for the Flash to push the Reverse Flash back to his timeline. After the Flash had pushed the Reverse Flash, he came to a complete stop, as the two forces of momentum gathered equal out to each other. M is the mass of the Flash, V is the speed he is running at, and finally gamma is the speed of light compared to the speed of light. Momentum will be measured in kilograms over meters per second. Length contraction is a decrease in length detected by the observer of objects that travel at any non-zero velocity relative to that observer. Lane contraction happens due to the fact that the speed of light in a vacuum is constant in any frame of reference. Due to Zoom's insanely fast speed, he will also undergo lane contraction. Objects which he speeds by will seem to look shorter or closer to him than how far they really are. For instance, Zoom is heading straight to a building. The distance he will see from him to the building will be shorter than what the actual distance is. If let's say someone at rest was to observe Zoom run, because he is running close to the speed of light, the observer will only be able to make out a glimpse of Zoom. The amount of contraction of the object is dependent upon the object's speed relative to the observer. To calculate the distance from Zoom or the observer to the building, formula L equals to L prime times gamma is used. L or Lm being the length between Zoom and the building, and L or L prime being the length of the observer in stationary position. Power is the rate in which work is done. When Zoom and the Flash first fought, Zoom had the strength and power to snap the Flash's back with ease. After he'd won the fight, he dragged the Flash's body to Star Labs. Power took to snap the flashes back can be found using the equation P equals work over time. To find the work, we would use the equation W equals F delta T equals theta. Time is just how long it took the zoom to snap the flashes back. Power measured in watts or joules per second. Although Zoom doesn't have super strength, he is still very strong compared to the average person. He has shown the ability to effortlessly exert great strength and force even without utilizing his speed, enough to lift fully grown humans over his head with only one arm, without any strain or effort. The work is being done as he is exerting a force which is being transferred from one person to the other. As he throws someone or something, like for example, this lightning bolt that the Flash threw, the equation work equals F delta T equals theta can be used. Force is just the force being applied to the object, d is the displacement of the object, and finally cos theta is the angle in which the object was thrown. The force is measured in joules. Zoom has the ability to phase or run through objects like walls or cars. He can phase through people without even harming them. Zoom does this by vibrating any part of his body so fast that he could effortlessly change his frequency and phase himself through people or objects. The physics behind this is basically quantum tunneling on a much larger scale. When Zoom runs through a wall, the particles in his body basically allow Zoom to just run through it. This follows the tennis ball scenario of hitting a tennis ball at a wall. Sooner or later, by hitting the tennis ball at the wall repeatedly, it will eventually appear on the other side of the ball. The ball wouldn't have gone around it or above the wall, but simply through it. The same scenario applies with Zoom's intangibility. As a byproduct of his speed, Zoom is capable of vibrating his molecules at atomic level, allowing him to pass through solid objects. However, Zoom vibrates at the wrong frequency. Whatever he passes through will explode, so correct calculations are key. For Zoom to successfully phase through an object or person, he must accurately determine the frequency of them. He must vibrate his body at such fast speeds to match that frequency. Using the equation F equals V over lambda, we can determine the frequency of Zoom's body. If he uses the speed he will have to vibrate at, lambda is the wavelength of the wall itself. To determine the frequency of the wall, Zoom will have to determine its natural frequency. To determine the wall's frequency, we'll have to use the equation F equals 1 over T. T is a period, or one oscillation, or basically just a period of wave cycles the wall goes through in 1 second. T is measured in seconds, and F is measured in hertz. When Zoom and the wall's frequency match up, Zoom will then be able to phase through it. Another scenario of Zoom vibrating his body is when he slashes Henry with his hands. He vibrates his hand at such speeds to be able to create a frequency which will be able to pierce Henry. The Flash is also able to vibrate his vocal cords in order to change the way he sounds to sound his identity. This will follow the sound frequency equation
We
F equals the
recognize your
speed of
voice.
sound over wavelength.
No, I can do this cool thing with my vocal cords where I vibrate them. So I sound like this.
Blackout was an ordinary citizen in Central City until the night of the Star Particle Accelerator was launched. His ability to generate electricity was formed during the night of the Particle Accelerator explosion in Central City, as he was hanging from a power transformer to get a better view when a wave struck the tower, electrocuting him. Since that night, he became a dangerous metahuman in CW series and has the ability to produce electricity from the palms of his hands. Later, Blackout became one of the strongest enemies of the heroes in The Flash, as he uses potential to generate electricity and a negative aspect in the society, to obstruct the lightness in the city into darkness. In several encounters against other metahumans, he produces a force field to protect and act as a shield against the superpowers of the heroes. In the encounter between Flash and Blackout uses his ability to create electricity from the current within himself to deploy a charge. Blackout imposes a charge to Flash's energy as an attempt to electrocute him to death. A charged object creates an electric field, which is an alteration of space or field in the region that surrounds it. Whether a charged object enters the space or not, the electric field still exists. As another charged object enters the space and moves deeper into the electric field, the effect becomes more noticeable. Electric field is a vector quantity whose direction is determined by the positive test charge will be pushed away when placed in the field. Thus, the electric field of a positive test charge is directed away. The negative test charge is always directed towards the negative source. In this case of Blackout's electric field, he acts as a negatively charged source towards Flash, and Flash acts as a positive test charge towards a negative flow of electrons transferred from Blackout's electric field. As you can see in the diagram on the screen, demonstrate the fundamental principle of charge interactions. A positively charged object will attract a negatively charged object. The magnitude of electric field can be determined by the formula epsilon equals force over Q. The F represents the force of electric field, which is determined by the K constant multiplied by the charge on the object. If it's a positively charged charge, it will be a proton, and if it's negatively charged, it will be electron. The amount of force over the charge can be determined the electric field in newtons per coulomb. Considering this case of two charges of different magnitudes, the amount of field lines abandoning the positive charge or advancing towards the negative charge is proportional to the magnitude of the charge. Thus, the greater the charge, the stronger the electric field. Furthermore, flash has a bigger charge than blackout, so its positive energy overthrows the negative electric field of blackout. Blackout's electricity holds electric potential energy shown when he is punched by Girder, yet he falls on the ground and electrocutes him with his electricity. Electric potential energy is the energy stored in the system of two charges that are distant apart. It represents the amount of energy Blackout is required to move a test charge toward Girder. Thus, over a distance from a spherical point charge, the electric potential energy is given by V equals kq over r. K represents the Coulomb's constant, Q represents the charge, and r represents the distance between the two charges. Blackout has a negative charge. The electric potential energy is very large negative value near the charge and increases approaching zero as r increases. In this case, Girder would run away, increasing the radius. The charge would decrease as he runs further away, will eventually reach zero. The difference between electric potential energy between Girder and blackout is known as electric potential difference. It represents the amount of energy required to move a charge from one point to another in the presence of an electric field. As energy moves from lower energy to higher energy, given the equation W equals Q epsilon R, the magnitude of work can be calculated by the charge on blackout multiplied by the electric field multiplied by the radius between flash and Girder. The electricity generated by blackout within himself violates how electricity works in society today. In order to generate electric current, basic requirements are a power source and a load source. Also, an electric current creates a magnetic field. However, in the flash, no magnetic field is flown because there is no wire. Blackout's analogy of him being electrocuted in a shock wave and obtaining a strong electric current is false in today's society, as the transfer of a mass amount of electrons through a human body would not be able to handle such great amount of electric current, leading to death. The magnitude of the current can be calculated by the given equation: current equals Q over T. Current is determined by the quantity of charge flowing through a wire in the time measured. If a small amount of current is transferred to one, the body reacts fast to overthrow the negative charge flow with positive charges. This is why electric shock occurs for only a few seconds. However, electric potential is used in medical applications today. An example of that is electrocardiography, as they use electric potential differences between two different points on the surface of the body. This is used to determine if the heart is healthy, it will produce a regular heartbeat pattern. If it produces an irregular heartbeat, it means the heart is unhealthy. Dr. Light is a supervillain and she has the ability to generate an intense amount of light. As she attempts to blast Flash with her light, diffraction of light occurs through the palms of her hands as they act as slits to cause constructive interference to attack Flash. The light released through Dr. Light's hands acts as the light traveling through a single slit. The central light is the bright center region in the interference pattern of light, and dark lines are produced around the center of the source. The light around the center bright spot progressively gets less intense. As seen in interaction, light is most intense at the center of light around the central maxima. It is dark. Since for each successive bright spot, more and more light sources interfere deconstructively. In pairs, intensity of light decreases. In order to calculate the wavelength of central maxima, the wavelength of single slit can be determined by the width of the slit multiplied by the distance from the entry point to the first maxima divided by the length of the slit to the object. This equation examines the single slit diffraction pattern in finding the wavelength of light, predicting the dimensions of patterns when two waves interfere to become superpositioned. Diffraction also takes place as light is shined through the palms of Dr. Light. Diffraction is a bending effect that occurs to waves that pass through an opening. In this case, the opening is Dr. Light's hands. As the wave travels through its small opening, more diffraction occurs, as the width of the wavelength is relatively small. Waves of longer length undergo more diffraction compared to waves with smaller wavelength. Also, the smaller the opening, the more diffraction occurs. Diffraction can be determined by the equation of lambda over the width of the opening. Using this ratio, diffraction can only be determined if the ratio is greater or equal to 1. The light produced from Dr. Light follows the principle of light behaves as waves, indicating light diffracts and travels through slits. On the other hand, it violates the fact that humans cannot contain such magnitude of light inside the body, as light produces heat and body can only stand up to 47 degrees Celsius. At such high temperatures, serious brain damage would occur and may lead to death. Oliver Queen has the ability to accurately utilize his bow and arrow to protect himself and kill enemies after very necessary. As shown when he kills Deadshot with his arrow, he stretches his bow to its maximum potential energy before the release of the arrow. Elastic potential energy stored in the string of the bow acts as a spring that can be deformed by a force, turns to its original position after the force is removed. Pulling the string back will cause an extension of the spring towards one whom is operating the bow, which will turn and result in opposite direction forward. The extent of stretching is produced as the material responds to stress. It's called strain. Strain is measured by the difference in length compared to the original length. When the stress is removed, there is two types of deformation that occur due to how far the atoms have been moved. Elastic and plastic deformation can occur. However, most machines are built to have elastic deformation. When stress removed, the material returns to its original position. Magnitude of the force depends on the length it has been compressed or stretched. The work of the string can be calculated by the area under a force versus the displacement of the string. Using the formula, energy equals 1/2 k delta x squared. K is a positive value known as the spring constant, and is a conservative force that has potential energy. X represents the charge of the length of the spring. The formula shows elastic energy stored in the string of the bow, calculated how much force the arrow will be released at. Physics in Oliver Queen's Physics in Oliver Queen arrow is relatable to physics in the world we live today. Electric potential energy of the arrow acts as a spring when being used to launch a ball vertically. As it stored electric energy in its system, when released, only energy acting on the arrow is energy of gravity. The energy acting on the bow is the elastic potential energy, when the bow is stretched to release the arrow. Once the arrow is released, the energy total before is the elastic energy, and the total energy after is gravitational energy, e.g. equals mgh. M stands for mass, g stands for gravitational acceleration, 9.8 meters per second squared, and h represents the height. Energy total before equals the elastic energy, because the gravitational energy is zero due to zero height. Kinetic energy is zero as the arrow is at rest, not moving, which means speed is zero. Energy total after is gravitational energy because the kinetic energy does not take place as the arrow is not moving at a velocity. And elastic energy is zero as no object is deformed by a force. When the arrow is released by the string of the bow, the arrow is released from force into projectile motion. For example, when arrow shot Slade Wilson, from the moment it left the bow, it only had force of gravity acting on it, and no other force. The gravitational force pulling it down will only affect the horizontal component of velocity. The horizontal velocity will remain in its motion. In the horizontal direction, there is no acceleration since gravity only pulls downwards and not sideways. Air resistance would affect the horizontal velocity as it would cause acceleration. Yet in the film, air resistance is negligible as the arrow does not slow down and directly hits its target.